First of all, welcome to everybody. I've not been meeting with you when you all have your regular meetings, but I am Regina Brown, and I'm the Director of Special Ed and Preschool for the Letcher County School System. And fortunately, this is my 32nd year as an educator, so I've been around for just a little bit. That's why the hair's so gray. So Dion had asked me to share with you some things that I do with Infinite Campus, and as we get closer to doing child count, that might help some of you guys utilize Infinite Campus a little bit better, and maybe even do things that would amaze people in your department so that your child count's running accurately. Okay, and so Dion, if you would advance to the first slide, please. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is a feature that each of you have access to in Infinite Campus, and that is called Caseload Summary. And so it is one of the most helpful tools for a special ed teacher in Infinite Campus because it provides you with immediate information that can keep you within timelines and cause you not to violate any federal timeline rules. So if you'd advance to the next slide. So I don't know if any of you all are sitting at your computer, but if you are and don't know how to do this, if you want to do this with me while I'm walking you through the slides, I can show you a few things about how to do Caseload Summary. So if you'll look on the left-hand side of the slide and go down to the light gray under reports that says Caseload Summary, we're going to be working with that first. So, but I wanted to mention right up above that is another caseload. Does everyone see that under the word Special Ed? Each of you all have students assigned to you on your caseload. And so if you click on just that caseload there, it will show them there as well. But you cannot run the reports that you might need to run to help you make sure that you don't miss timelines or have left something off an IEP that needs to be there. And so I want you to go, if you're in your computer, you can go under reports to Caseload Summary. If you want to run your Caseload Summary, you would then check the box that says SPED, like I have in the picture here. And then you would highlight Case Team Manager, which is you. And then in the box there where it says Caseload Staff, you could put your name in. Or if you wanted to see every child in your school and who their case manager is, you can just leave that blank and then click Generate Report. And then that will show you a report of who is on your caseload. And Dion, if you'll advance to the next slide. This is a caseload summary for a teacher that's in our meeting today. And I've blacked out the student's information so we wouldn't violate any confidentiality. Right now at this school, this teacher has one kid on her caseload. And so if you'll notice, it gives the name of the school. If I had not have blacked it out or whited it out, it gives the student's ID number, their birth date, and their name. And then the important information to the right of that is what their disability is, what their special ed least restrictive environment setting is, when their reevaluation due date is, and reeval, remember, is due every 3 years minus a day. So this is when they would have to be evaluated and a meeting held by for them to meet their reeval deadline. Of course, the plan type is a special ed plan. And then finally, it lists the beginning and the ending date of their individual education plan. And so if you'll notice, the ending date is always going to be 1 day less than the beginning date because federal law says you will meet annually prior to the day that it was held the previous year. So that's a year minus a day, okay? And then for this case, go back one. She is the case manager. You could also run this report for, if you'll go back to the previous slide, Dion.
Yep. Here.
If you'll notice in the circle that box there where it shows team members, team right there. If you'll notice there's other things to choose there. One of them is service provider. So if any of your kids have a physical therapist, speech therapist, occupational therapist, or anybody else assigned as providing services to that child other than you, then they can run a caseload, or you can also run a caseload by choosing service provider, and it'll show you who the kids are in your building that have those services and who provides them. Okay, now go forward 2 slides.
Okay. Okay, just 1 second.
Okay, good, right there. So this is, there are several pages to this, so I only took a copy of one. But what I do every year to help make sure that child count is accurate is I run every school's caseload summary and look for errors in it. For instance, if you have held an IEP meeting and not, you know, as of October the 10th, Infinite Campus's feature to end date the old IEP has tore up. And so it's not been fixed yet. And so if you've not end dated the old IEP, when you held your new IEP meeting, it'll have overlapping IEPs on this report. And as a director, or if you all have department heads like I do in my county, it helps us to know what we need to go back and fix so there's not overlapping IEPs. But what I wanted you to see on this page is if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it'll tell you how many students are at Cowan Elementary School, for instance, and how many IEPs that they have.
Sorry.
And so at that school, they currently have 83 students that are showing up active with an IEP on the caseload. Now, if you go back to that very first slide I had with active search. So the next feature that is in Infinite Campus that I use almost daily is active search. And active search is a tool that's on the left-hand side of Infinite Campus that you can run for a lot of things. And so, for instance, you can check how many students are active in your school, or how many students are inactive in your school with an IEP, or how many students are in referral, pre-referral, or for instance, if you need to know how many kids have a certain disability in your county, you can even run that by school. So to do active search, you would go to the left-hand side of Infinite Campus, and instead of index, this time you're going to click on the search tab. And under search, once you click on that, it's in the middle there will become gray and look like it does on the screen right now. Under status, if you want to find out how many active students there are at your school in special ed, then you go to the drop-down box, choose active, and then do a search. And then I've had to black out all of this on the left, but if you'll notice right below where the line is that you can write in a student's name, it'll say search results 83. Does everybody see that? So over the next couple of weeks, your directors are going to be telling you that your active search is not matching your caseload possibly. And what that means is you've got someone not showing up where they need to show up. And so in this case, on our caseload we looked at on the previous page, there were 83 students. When we did our active search for Cowan Elementary on this page, we had 83 students. So we have exactly the number of students showing on active search as we do on caseload. So right now it appears like there are no errors on child count for Cowan Elementary School, okay? The other neat thing about this is you can run, a lot of y'all are still taking classes and might need information, for instance, for some of your, like how many MMD kids are in your school. Then you can run by disability and search that as well. Or if you want to know how many 8th grade students have an active IEP, then you can go up here to where grade is and choose 8th and then active and search. There's a lot of things that you can do under active search that can provide you with some useful information. When I make schedules out, for instance, or caseloads out for my teachers, I try to put all of the grade level with one teacher that I can, so they're not split up so much over different grades serving different kids. It just makes their job easier, and it makes our students get better services. And so I use this search engine a lot to help me, but it's also good in that when you do have an error, more than likely it is under active search, advanced search, and it is a kid that has probably left your school and they're going to be in red, which means somebody hasn't ended their enrollment for your school in special ed. And so once you clear all of that up, it will match perfectly. And so what I would tell you is over the next few days, you're going to hear a lot of that talk about making these match. And the reason is we don't want to not count a kid because we didn't look and try to make sure everybody was accurately counting. Okay, so our next slide. So before we go to that next slide, does anyone have any questions about advanced search or active search or caseload summaries? Because I'm not looking at the chat box or anything, so I don't know if anybody's asking questions or...
Monitor the chat, Regina, and let you know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Chastity. And if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, feel free to do that. The only question that is a dumb question is the one you don't ask. You know, what I tell my staff is I can't help you if I don't know what it is you're having trouble with. And so the worst thing you can do is not ask a question. And so now I want to move to what I do myself that's kind of overkill, but it helps me not be as stressed out when child count comes around. So I make my own spreadsheets and I use them for reeval, for referral. I use them for annual reviews. I use them for 504s, you name it. Anything I've got spreadsheets on it. So we're going to look at a couple of mine. The first one I'm going to show you is my master reevaluation list that I send out quite frequently to my teachers. And so if you'll notice on this page, this is for one of my schools and I've taken out the names of my students. And if you'll notice, I identify what grade they're in, what their disability is, and then what type of evaluation that we need completed on them for reeval, when it's due, and then who the case manager is. And then in the right-hand corner is where we're at with that evaluation. And so I track it all the way from consent to complete. And I email this usually weekly to that staff at that school so they can keep track of that. Even though their caseload summary has that on it, I know sometimes we get rather busy and we don't always look at that. And in the old days before caseload summaries, us old folk used to just write them down on a legal pad and keep track of them. And I still write a lot down, but that's how it is. So that's how I track reevals. And if you'll notice the tabs at the bottom, I do it by school and by month. And so as a month clears off, I move to the next month. And that's how we try to not miss a reevaluation deadline. Okay, the next slide I have for you is how we do referrals. And so as we begin kids in our referral process, and in Letcher County, we call that SWAT. And that's Chastity's favorite word. It is the school-wide assistance team. And we move them through tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions. We require a meeting to begin tier 3 and a meeting to end tier 3 and a referral meeting at the end of tier 3. And so the school that you have in front of you has been doing very well with moving their kids through interventions, but I wanted you to kind of see what I track for each school. I track the kid, the grade, what we're suspecting. In the middle there where it says special ed teacher, it would also say the regular ed teacher's name. If the kid, I don't know why they whited that out because it wasn't a violation of anything, but it has, I usually put the regular ed teacher, the special ed teacher, and if any of our therapists are involved in the meeting, I do that as well.
Sorry, I was
and then because we're getting close to child count, my schools are getting this almost on a daily basis. And so they know daily and they have to tell me daily when somebody's going to have a meeting so I can keep up with it. But I just wanted to kind of share that with you. That's a little overkill that I do, but we never have errors for child count because of it. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. So there is a report that you all may not have access to called Special Ed Ad Hoc Report. And there's many, many things that I as a director and your directors can run under that ad hoc report. And I took a screenshot just to show you where it's at. For instance, I can run every kid that's got a transportation code for special transportation. That's kind of a big thing in the spring that everybody needs to know. I can run all students with an active IEP, things like that. Race and gender, disabilities, all of that stuff. But the next page, I want to show you the one that's real important this time of year. If you'll notice, I've got one highlighted in bold blue there, and it's students with unlocked IEPs. So all of you guys are new and you're holding your very first ARC meetings, and it's getting a lot more stressful, and it will get even worse between now and December 1, especially if you are in K-3 schools. The one thing that gets the ire of your special ed director the most is when you don't lock your IEPs, because an unlocked IEP serves two purposes. Number one, if it's unlocked, it doesn't count on child count and your district doesn't receive funding for it. That's a big deal. That's how they pay for your salaries. That's how they pay for instructional aides. That's how they pay for supplies. And so if you leave an IEP unlocked and a kid does not get counted, that is money your own district has to pay from district funds instead of federal funds. So just remember that. The other reason IEPs should always be locked is that your regular education teachers have access to read the IEP without having to come to your room and dig through a folder and a file cabinet on Infinite Campus. But the IEP must be locked for that regular ed teacher to access it. So just remember, check. I mean, most of you all have caseloads with 15 kids on it. It really takes less than 30 minutes to click on each kid and make sure everything's locked, okay? So just make it a habit to lock everything after you hold a meeting, and then you'll never have an issue with this. Now, with that being said, in my county, and I don't know how your other school districts do things, but like in my county, I require my teachers to prepare a rough draft of their meeting prior to the meeting so that they're not sitting there typing a whole meeting and making people sit and wait for hours. I also make them start notifying the parents of the upcoming meeting a month in advance. So there's just some things, each director does things differently. That's just how I do it. Dion, if you'll go to the next page. So the next page is kind of a big deal. This is what a child count, this is what an unlocked IEP report would look like for Letcher County right now. As of today, I have 48 records unlocked in Infinite Campus. What that means is I have 48 students that are not counting on my child count. Now, while we're looking at this, if you'll notice, it tells me the school. I've got the students' names blacked out or whited out now. And then I want you to go to the column that says IEP special ed status. And I'm going to show you a trick. All these A's mean that they have an active enrollment, but then there's a blank. Do you see the blank? Dion, can you circle one of them blanks?
I sure will. Yeah, I'm sorry, Regina.
She's virtually challenged today, ain't she, Chelsea?
I'm struggling today.
You on the struggle bus, not enough caffeine.
It's just my technology is giving me all kinds of trouble.
Okay, if you see those blanks there, what that probably means, especially the one that's got the Z beside of it, Z means they're in referral. So that means that ARC has an IEP typed in rough draft form, but they've not held the meeting or locked it yet. The reason it's blank is that they've not locked the eligibility document and fetched it to the IEP. And so that's a common error that many of our teachers forget to do in an IEP meeting, and that's fetch their enrollment tab on the third, I think it's the third tab on the IEP, to click fetch and put in the enrollment and the LRE. But I wanted to show you what an unlocked IEP report looks like. You may never see one unless you're a director, but this is something your director might copy and call you about, though. I mean, if I find out some of these are people that are not in referral, I'm probably going to call that teacher and say, hey, Chastity, you've got 3 IEPs unlocked here. Get them locked, right?
I will add, while we're waiting on this, that when Regina was talking about those spreadsheets, about the referral and reevaluations list, It was very helpful. I was on the receiving end of those, and what I liked about it is it was sent to everybody, so everybody saw what everybody saw, and all the teachers knew who was responsible and who to go to and things like that, and it did help you. You may have it written down, and when it's due, but your speech person may not, or your regular ed teacher, and things like that. So it is a very organizational tool, or a very good one. It's very helpful.
Well, and I think, what people will find is some kids have 4 and 5 people working at the same time with them, and they don't get to communicate as well as they would like to because they're so spread out. And so a lot of times we get off page with each other. We don't need to be. Everybody needs to be on the same page. I may have already said this a couple times, but I'm going to stress it because it's the most important time for special ed teachers. Christmas and Thanksgiving is not near as significant right now as child count for districts. And so child count has to be completed by midnight on December the 1st. If a child is not counted by midnight on December the 1st, you receive no funding for them. So I'm going to stress that again, how important that child count is. And since you're new, you're going to see some very stressed out older teachers that understand the crazy time of year we like to call child count. And I've made the brag that when I retire, my effective retirement date is going to be December 1. So I can laugh at everybody, okay? It may be November the 30th. But anyway, one tool that we have is a child count error report, and it helps us find errors. So Dion, thank you. You went right where I needed you to go. Go back up, that one. So the way you run a child count error report is on the left-hand side under KDE reports. There is one called IDEA, December 1 Child Count Extract. You may not have rights to this, but in my district, I've given one person at each school the right to this so they can run that for their individual school. So I wanted to run it for all of my schools. So if you'll notice on the right-hand side in blue, I highlighted every school in my district. Now, all I have to do to see my child count error report and my extract is to click Generate Extract. So Dion, if you go to the next slide, it will show you what that looks like. So when I click Generate Extract, the first thing that I'm going to see, and this is not the full part of it, but it's all I could screenshot, are the different errors that my district has. And if you'll notice, there are 3 of them that are in purple: error 1, error 3, and error 5. Those are ones that I have to look at and resolve so that my child count is accurate for December 1. And so it tells me what error 1 is. It's records that have a reeval due before child count. So if they're not complete before child count, then I'm not going to get to count them for child count, and I'm going to be violating law on reevaluation. Error 3 is an annual review. It means their annual review is due before child count. Same thing. If I don't do it, they're not going to count, and I'm also going to violate federal law on annual review timelines. And then for me, error 5 is the kid is currently developmentally delayed, but they have an eligibility due or turn 9 before December 1st, okay? And so those are the 3 primary errors that I have in Letcher County. And so you can see I've got quite a few to resolve. Once I resolve those, I'll know how high my count is. So the next thing I would do is there's a button there that says click here. And when I do, you're fine, Dion. When I click that button, then on the next page, the next slide, I can run a report that shows every single child in the Letcher County school system. And if I scroll all the way to the last child and subtract 1, it tells me what my count is for the county. And so mine right now, I checked it earlier, 785. And I counted 9, I usually run about 910. And so my numbers are down right now, but that's because we've got about 100 in referral, okay? So if you'll move to the next slide, Dion. This next thing, if you are a preschool teacher or serve preschool with special ed services, Preschool also does child count for December 1. It's called the fall child count. And then they do another one in the spring in March. So they get to count twice. I wish special ed was that way, because if a kid doesn't place by December in special ed, they don't get counted till a year and a half later for funding. For preschool, though, you get 2 counts a year. So if you'll flip to the next one, Dion. We would do it very similar. We go to the preschool enrollment count. If you'll notice, it lets me choose fall. I can drop down and choose spring. And then I can choose summary or detail. The first one I'm going to show you is summary. So go to the next slide. When I run my summary report, it shows me this, and this gives me how many students I have that are 2, 3, and 4 with and without disabilities, severe, and speech. So it gives me my count for every category for preschool. And then I can also run a detail report, which will be the next slide that Dion's going to show you. And I've had to white out names to show you kind of what it would look like. It shows me those same details that I had in the first slide, but then it shows me the kids' names. And I've blacked those out, obviously. But it gives me everything I need to know whether they're counting or not. And I can take that with my enrollment for preschool and make sure every kid's counting. Okay, Dion? That is all I have. I hope some of you have questions. I hope that it's answered some burning questions for you.
Maybe one question I would have as a new teacher is, because this is a lot of useful information, and some of the things that you shared, it gave a really good understanding of how that works. But as a new teacher, what specifically would I really need to be, other than make sure my IEPs and my documents are locked? What else would I need to focus on to make sure that I'm going to be in compliance for child count? Like these reports, would they be responsible for running the reports and things like that?
I think that they would need to run their caseload summary for certain, and then go through that summary with a fine-tooth comb and make sure it matches what your hard copies are. You know, I use the computer every day, but I'm a firm believer that they make errors. They make errors like we make errors. And so I tell my staff, my new staff, the best device for learning how to do this is to get that folder out and to go through it and to look at it yourself and make sure that matches. For instance, a lot of my staff struggle with knowing when eligibility date is. The eligibility date is not the date they were tested. A lot of people forget that, and they think it's the date that the evaluator came and performed a test on that child. That is not the eligibility date for that child. The eligibility date is the date that they meet and discuss evaluation results and determine if they meet Kentucky guidelines for eligibility for some kind of disability or more than one disability, okay? And so that date is on a certain form, and I ask my staff to go in there and write that down and make sure it matches their caseload summary. Because what I've found with Infinite Campus is that teachers forget to fetch that new eligibility to an IEP, and it still shows them out a timeline for reeval because they forgot to do it. And so then that kid's not counting. The best thing that you can do is walk up to your older teachers in the building and say, what can I do to help? Without a doubt, if you want to make an impression on your staff that you are working with for the very first time, the best thing you can do is walk up to them seasoned special ed teachers and say, do you need me to help do behavior observations? Is there anything that I can do for you so that I can learn this process better? And then the next thing I would say is, before you do anything, ask one of them to look at it and make sure you're doing it okay. You know, we have mentors for our teachers that work with them, and then I have 2 district-wide consultants that they can call and ask questions. I don't know that every district can afford to do that or has that. And then I'm open book. I would rather you call and ask me the most dumb question on the face of this earth than you to make a mistake. Nothing's dumb that you ask. You know, I had a seasoned teacher ask last week how many days was in a referral. It's 60 school days. 60 school days from the moment of consent to get them evaluated and discuss the evaluation results. Okay. I mean, I don't care to share anything with anybody. I think we make better teachers by helping them. And if we help you, then you help our kids. And so if you think of something after this meeting or want to ask me something privately, my email address is regina.brown@letcher.kyschools.us. Don't care one bit. I'll answer your question as quickly as I can.
We appreciate that, Regina. So just for a little bit of background information, Regina is in the KVEC service area, but she is our representative for the CGIC committee. And if you could just tell them what that CGIC committee does, Regina, so they kind of have an idea and they'll know, they can put a face to a name so they'll know what you represent with.
CGIC is a committee that meets statewide. It's made up with a member from each co-op in Kentucky. We work with the company Infinite Campus. And so we meet with them about monthly. Right now we're meeting with them more than monthly. We've met twice in the last 2 weeks to discuss how to change Infinite Campus to make it better for you and better for us. For instance, auto end date that's in our IEPs that right now isn't working was Regina Brown. I fought for that for 3 years, and we have auto end date on IEPs now. We've talked a lot about birth dates on your caseload summary is because I fussed about it. Because if you have a DD kid, you need to know when they're turning 9. You shouldn't have to go to the computer to look it up. You should have a birth date right there in front of you. And so they were able to do that for us because we sit there and talked a lot about how that would be so useful for us. So we work with Infinite Campus to make Infinite Campus better for you. Okay. And so, but we also, a lot of times we answer a lot of questions that are not related to Infinite Campus for the state as well. And so I enjoy being on it, learned a lot. I'm kind of the oldest member on it other than Wayne now. So actually I'm older than Wayne because he rotated off and now he's back on.
Well, it's good to know and good to have you here to share that with us. So what we do, Regina, is on the Holler website that we manage through KVEX. That's our place-based social learning platform. We house all of the new and emerging teacher cadre meetings. So we will house this information, the video recording, and we will put in there maybe just the information about your email contact, if that's okay, Regina, because they may think of a question later. Again, you have to kind of get in there and understand it sometimes to be able to formulate a question that you might come across. So, and you'll think of it later. So we'll make that available to you. And you guys can respond to me in the email that I sent with the invitation link as well. And we'll get those questions to Regina, because I think it's important is that as those of us in the field, those of you guys that are practitioners have those questions, you can take them to the folks that have a voice for us in our region. So we appreciate that, Regina. And I want to make sure everybody knew kind of what that role was. So any other questions? We'll field those questions. But again, I'll make that Regina's email available for you guys, and she's on the global also. She's at Letcher County. She's the director of special education in Letcher County. So, but I'll give you just a minute, and if we don't have any other questions, is there any kind of concluding remarks, Regina, or anything else? So.
Yeah, I'm just excited to be working with new teachers. I think about 7 of them on here are my new teachers, so they've already heard some of this already. But I think they can tell you that the resources we give them, we try to make them better. And so, and I know that your all's directors are doing the same. And so we want you to succeed. We want you to be the best that you can be. And just a side note for me, my number one passion is fighting for my kids. And so as long as you're on that side, you're always going to have my good side. But I'm sure every director will tell you when you're not doing your job, you're going to have our bad side. So learn. Padawans need to learn. Okay. Right, Chas?
So Regina, we appreciate you. You do always have a strong representation in our new emerging teacher cadre. And we invite you to come back and join us each time we meet. Again, just a reminder, we meet the second Wednesday of the month from 3:30 to 4:30. And our next session will be on December the 9th. So we're trying to make sure that we're getting you timely and relevant information. And in a way that comes just as you need it to support you. And if you think of things you need, we'll reach out and contact directors and share information here. But we're glad to have all of you all. I hope you all are having a successful year, and we'll meet back again in December 9th at 3:30. Thank you all. Thank you, Regina.
See y'all.